Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to start a new unit today talking about ecology. Now, what does this mean? I'm just going to introduce this today, and we're going to start a new unit today and learn about ecology and what that means in the field of biology. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it and see what we're talking about today. So, what is ecology? Okay, so ecology is a branch of biology, and it deals with relationships, specifically the relationships between organisms and other organisms, as well as organisms and the abiotic surroundings. Now, we haven't talked about what that word means, abiotic, yet, but we're going to get there in just a second. Basically, what this means is ecology is studying how animals interact with other animals, as well as organisms with other organisms, and what role their physical environments play in those interactions, as well as how they interact with their physical environment. So what does abiotic means? You can kind of think of it as the physical surroundings in the environment. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at these two terms in a little bit more detail. We're going to use these terms a lot this unit, biotic and abiotic. Now, what do these two words mean? Well, I want you to really focus in on that root word, bio, B-I-O, right? Bio. Okay, so bio is a root word that means life. So if something is biotic, that means it is a living thing. You can think of it as like a plant or an animal, but it's also bacteria as well as microscopic protists and single-celled organisms that you wouldn't be able to see without a microscope. So if it's living, we would say that it is biotic. Okay, the opposite of that is abiotic. And you can see in this word, it has that root word bio, but remember the prefix a means without. So what does abiotic mean? It means without life. So this is the physical, non-living portion of the environment. Some examples of abiotic would be rocks and soil, water, sunlight, and other things that make up the environment. So again, biotic factors are living things, and abiotic factors are things in the environment that are not alive, but are there, and animals and organisms interact with them sometimes. Okay, so what I want to do now is let's take a look at this picture, okay, and I want us to take a second and see if we can pick out the abiotic and the biotic factors in this picture. So take a close look at that. What's going on here? This is a painting of some boats pulling up on shore, and the people are unloading the boats and bringing their horses and other things in and out of town, right? So I want us to take a second, look at that picture, and let's see if we can pick out some biotic factors, okay? Remember, biotic means living, or it has life, okay? So what are some biotic factors in this picture? Well, there's a lot of them, but here are some that we could have focused in on. I see people, birds, ducks and geese, horses, trees, and plants, right? All of those things are alive, and so we would say that those are biotic factors. Okay, next up, I want us to try to pick out some abiotic factors. Remember, abiotic means without life. So what are some things in this picture that are there but aren't really considered alive? And there's a lot of different options, but here are a couple that you might have noticed. So we can say water, clouds, rocks and soil, sunlight, boats, and houses. All of these things would be abiotic. They're in the picture, but they don't have any life, and so they are abiotic factors. So you're going to hear us use those words a lot throughout this unit. Again, biotic means it's alive, and abiotic means it is not alive. Great. So I wanted to introduce some other vocabulary. Okay, we're going to use these words a lot throughout this unit, and it's going to be easier to understand what we're talking about if we go ahead and talk about these vocabulary words. So when it comes to discussing ecology, we need special vocabulary. Let's review some of the following words, and figure out what they mean in an ecological setting. Okay, so a word that we've used a lot throughout this whole course is the word organism. What is an organism? Well, you are an organism. An organism is one single individual living thing. So a cat is an organism. A dog is an organism. That tree is an organism. But also this protist or bacteria, things that are really, really small, single-celled. You wouldn't be able to see them without a microscope. They are organisms. They're living things, and so we would say that that is an organism. Okay, a new word I wanted to talk about is species. What does this word species mean? Well, a species is made up of related individuals that are able to produce fertile offspring. okay? So all of the cats that you see in your neighborhood, right, those are all the same species. All the dogs in your neighborhood, they're all the same species. Humans are all one species. Now, one important part of this definition is that last part where it says able to produce fertile offspring. And I wanted to talk about this for a second. There are some organisms that would not be considered its own species, and these are usually some sort of hybrid organism. So I've talked about this a couple times, but I need to bring it up here as well. Okay, so you can take a donkey and a horse and crossbreed them, and the hybrid animal that you get is called a mule. Now, a mule is an organism, it's an animal, but we do not consider mules as their own species because mules are not fertile. So you can't take one mule and breed it with another mule and produce a mule. They're infertile. And so those hybrid animals are not a species. If they can't reproduce and make fertile offspring, we would not consider them as a species on its own. Okay, I got a couple more vocabulary terms I want to introduce here, so let's take a close look at those. The next one here is population. What is a population? Okay, a population is a group of multiple individuals or organisms of a single species that live within a particular area. So an example of this would be a pride of lions in India's Gir National Park, right? There's two parts of a population. It has to be multiple individuals that are all of the same species in a specific area, right? So a pride of lions, that's what you call a group of lions, is a pride. So a pride of lions, and then you can see that it has a location attached to it. When you have a group of animals of the same species in a particular location, that is a population, okay? The next level up when it comes to ecological hierarchy is this term here at the bottom called community. So what is a community? A community is two or more populations of different species that occupy the same space at the same time. So this is like a population, but it's dealing with multiple different species instead of just one. So an example of a community would be all of the wolves, elk, sheep, coyotes, frogs, and fish in Yellowstone National Park. Again, notice here that even though we're dealing with different species of animals, there is a location tied to it. And you can see the second part of that definition there says at the same place at the same time. So all of those wolves, coyotes, frogs, all of that stuff in Yellowstone National Park, because they're all in the same spot at the same time, that's when we would consider them as a community. Okay, great. I have a couple more vocabulary terms, so just hang in there with me. All right, let's take a look at these. These are just a couple more I need to put on top of those ones we just talked about. So the next term here is ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? Well, this is a term used for all the biotic and abiotic things in a system. So this is the next level up past community. In an ecosystem, we're dealing with living things and non-living things. So an example of an ecosystem would be birds, frogs, plants, bacteria, water, sunlight, rocks, and soil. So the water, sunlight, rocks, and soil, those are all abiotic factors, but once we get to this ecosystem level, that's when we're dealing with both animals or organisms and non-living things. Okay, so ecosystems have biotic and abiotic factors. Okay, the next level up is a biome. What is a biome? This is a term used to describe a certain area, and this area has a lot of characteristics that are similar. So biomes are determined by the primary vegetation, the climate, and the geographic location, okay? And these are also going to have similar animals in there. So a biome is a certain location, an area that has similar vegetation, animal life, climate, and geographic location. Okay, next up, the biosphere. So we're seeing that prefix again. Bio means life, and sphere obviously is talking about a 3D circle, right? So a biosphere, this is the term used to describe the combination of all ecosystems on the planet. The biosphere includes all living things and their relationships. So the biosphere is basically the part of the earth that can support life. It goes way down deep into the bottom of the ocean where we see some of those really strange fish that like to live in total darkness, but it also goes really high up in the atmosphere, the tallest mountain that can support life, or even birds flying really, really high in the atmosphere. Because there's living things there, it would be considered the biosphere. Okay? So I have a little I want to see if we can use some of these terms correctly. What I'm going to do is put a couple pictures up on the board, and I want you to decide if we're looking at a species, a population, or a community, okay? And we're going to do it by looking at an animal that I think is very interesting. This is one of my favorite animals on the whole planet. I'm going to go ahead and put those pictures up here for you. Okay, so what we're looking at here, look at these pictures. Okay, these pictures are of a specific type of animal that live in Africa. These are called the African painted dogs, and they've got this really cool coat to them. It looks like someone just picked up paint and threw it all over these animals. They've got brown and white and black. They're very interesting animals. They're hypercarnivorous, so they eat a lot of meat. They're very good at hunting. They hunt in a pack. You can see that picture on the far right over there. It's a lot of these dogs taking down this huge animal, right? Okay, so what I want us to do, one of these pictures is an organism, one of these pictures is a population, and one of these pictures is a community. And I want to see if we can figure out which one's which. Okay, so let's look at that one on the far left over there. We have one independent individual animal or organism. What would we call that? Well, I kind of gave it away just there. That's an organism, right? One living thing, one animal is called an organism, okay? What if we get several different organisms together that are of the same species in the same place at the same time? So this middle picture here, these are a couple of these painted dogs, and they're in a refugee or a reserve somewhere to keep them safe. They're an endangered species. So what would we call that? Well, we've got more than one organism. When we have more than one at the same place of the same species, this would be called a population, right? So we would have a lot of these dogs in this area. Okay, the last one on the right over there, you can see that we have all of these dogs, but they're also hunting this big antelope animal. Okay, so what would that be called when we're looking at several different species and how they interact with each other? Well, that would be a community, right? A community is animals of different species or organisms of different species all interacting with each other, okay? So thank you all so much for making it here today. Your teacher has some other work for you to do, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.